Hi, and welcome to He Has Answers, a completely free online ministry resource that, while still very much under construction, contains more than enough information to help you come to know the God who made you, knows you, loves you, and whom wants you to come and know Him so you may be saved and have everlasting life. In this series of videos, we'll be reading through a downloadable PDF file of an unfinished free ebook titled He Is, the Truth that God Exists, and the Thorough Investigation of Undeniable Proofs, so that you can see that beyond a reasonable doubt, God is real and the Holy Bible is His Word. If you'd like a copy of this PDF file for yourself, it can be downloaded here by right-clicking this link and saving the link as is in a folder on your own personal computer or even in your mobile device. Now let's begin. Hi, and welcome back to the reading of the free ebook, He Is. We are in part 3, The Devil is Real, and He Wants You to Go to Hell. One benefit of being able to listen to audio rather than read through a book is that you can still follow along with this message even while carrying on with whatever else you might be doing in your day. So I invite you to do just that. Let's pray before we start. God, please give me a soft and humble heart as I listen. Please open my eyes and my ears and change my spirit so I may know you and worship you in spirit and in truth. He attacks the mind. As we've covered how the devil speaks into the mind to influence our will, deceive us, affect our thinking, and now how he speaks accusations as well as false comfort into our mind, it should be no shock that he attacks us through thoughts as well. My friend, have you ever heard of the term negative self-talk? That's when you think negative thoughts about yourself. They can keep you from reaching your full potential, reinforce negative beliefs about yourself, and even lead you deep into depression through a sense of hopelessness. You can think those thoughts as a result of someone else first saying something negative, or you can think them up on your own. Here's the thing. Your enemy may have first tempted a person into impulsively saying something negative. Also, that first negative thought that seemed to come from yourself may very well have been the enemy whispering it into your mind. As we've already mentioned, such inner speech does not have to feel or sound foreign to us, as our enemy can easily impersonate our own mental voice. Have you ever had an experience where you were busily thinking and doing activities, and suddenly, as if from nowhere, a negative thought crossed your mind about yourself, which had no correlation to what you were doing? By this I mean that you could be out watching a football game and having a great time laughing and cheering when suddenly in your mind pops, "You're ugly." You weren't looking in a mirror, examining yourself and scrutinizing flaws, and nothing on the field triggered the thought. It may have almost felt foreign to you, except for the fact that it was your own inner voice. Whether you were able by your will to dismiss the thought, or by your will you accepted the thought and let it stew, you acknowledged it as coming from yourself, didn't you? For a lot of people, especially in formative years, the development of a healthy self-esteem is incredibly difficult. Negative self-talk can be incessant and utterly destructive to a person. It can break the spirit of a person, then settles into the thinking that you will never be free or able to overcome whatever you're believing to be a problem. Then thoughts of suicide start to tempt you. For some, tragically, they succumb to these lies. But this is how the devil attacks us through our mind to destroy us. Yet whether the first thought was his or yours or someone else's, all he has to do is continue watering it. He can be subtle, or if he perceives you are vulnerable, he can bombard you. Because so many people accept this as their own thinking, as they have no spiritual understanding of their enemy, they are defenseless and feel as if they are their own worst enemy. Worse is this reality. The devil need only get the ball rolling, and too often, for too many people, we take over and we continue to water and grow our own garden of self-destructive and self-defeating negativity. Don't we, friend? You're fat. You're stupid. You're worthless. You'll never do it. You're too slow. You're too dumb. You're not good enough. You're a whore. Do these sound at all familiar to you? In our world today, where our psychiatrists and our psychologists and our counselors have zero belief in a real spiritual enemy, or at best appreciate his existence but not how he attacks, they wrongly respond with one answer: medication. Sadly, this medication all too often serves to dull what is deemed as an overactive mind, or it works to chemically improve the mood of a person. Meanwhile, this is affecting the brain, which connects to the spirit through the mind, and it's all been created by God so that we can properly relate to Him, think about Him, and meditate on His Word to know Him. Does a cocktail of mind altering drugs sound conducive to our ability to seek, know, and build a relationship with the Lord? Hardly, I would say. So it's no wonder that this is how the devil attacks and why he's influenced our medical community to approach the issue purely through a bias of philosophical naturalism. That way, not only can he destroy us and handicap us, but he keeps us from seeking the ultimate source of salvation and relief. However, this is not to say that the problem is not at all physiological. There is actually a time and a place for medication in some cases. This is because changes actually occur within our brain when we ruminate in negativity. Just like when someone learns to play an instrument or a sport, neural pathways are forming so that the activity can be done more effectively and efficiently. That means that a person can not only become skilled at piano or football or fluent in a second language, they can also become adept at self-critical thinking. As we agree more with the lies of the devil, which he uses to influence our will and shape us, the easier it gets for us to automatically have those same thoughts. It becomes our nature, and he no longer must actively involve himself. As a gardener tends to a young sapling, eventually the root system has grown firm and set and does not need close attention. This is what the devil is trying to accomplish in us. Before too long, the heartbreaking thoughts above become, I'm fat, I'm stupid, I'm worthless, I'll never do it, I'm too slow, I'm too dumb, I'm not good enough, I'm a whore. Once accepted as truth, the devil need only pop in occasionally to make sure the sapling is still in place, growing and doing well. How sad. It's no wonder then that God's greatest missionary, the Apostle Paul, would write to the church in Philippi. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. The Epistle to the Philippians, chapter 4, verse 8. Paul had a very intimate understanding of how the devil attacks through our own mind and thoughts. After he had his incredible vision of the third heaven in the spirit, or out of body, which gave him that awesome insight to discuss the heavenly realm with us, in order to be kept humble so that pride would not ruin him and his ministry, he describes the following. So to keep me from becoming conceited, because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations, a thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from becoming conceited. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. But he said to me, My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. The second epistle to the Corinthians, chapter 12, verses 7 to 9. Paul described receiving a thorn in the flesh, which troubled him and kept him from getting too big for his britches. For whatever reason, I'll never know, but perhaps to de-emphasize the involvement of the devil and his forces, pastors have often interpreted this to mean that Paul received a physical ailment. There seems to be scriptural reason to believe that his eyesight was very poor, but why then wouldn't Paul plainly identify that as the issue causing his trouble? Perhaps this was because of the references to Paul's flesh, but we know that flesh does not always imply the physical body in the New Testament, but also the sin nature of a person. More so, Paul actually defines his thorn in the very next line, a messenger of Satan to harass me. I don't think it needs any more clarification than that. Paul was being bothered by a demonic messenger who served the devil. The Greek word used above for messenger is angelos. This is where we get our word angel. This word is found 186 times in the New Testament of the King James Version of the Bible. 179 of those times the scholars chose to translate the word as angel, and only 7 times did they translate it into messenger. It seems clear then that Paul's thorn in the flesh is a fallen angel who rebelled alongside Satan and was now being used to torment God's servant with thoughts that would keep him humble and reliant on the grace of God as his strength. In God's wisdom, he did not deliver Paul from the attacks as he did with Joshua the high priest, during the devil's accusations because he understood that the best place to be was in complete dependence of himself. Paul's defense then was to focus on God and the truth of God. Read how Paul would defeat such attacks. In all circumstances, take up the shield of faith with which you can extinguish all the flaming darts of the evil one. The Epistle to the Ephesians, chapter 6, verse 7. Like flaming darts meant to penetrate our mind and cause injury to our spirit and weaken us, Paul says that faith is what makes such attacks ineffective. It's like the enemy is trying to shoot these fiery arrows through the portcullis of the believer's castle, but they take every thought captive, testing the spirit behind it, and rebuke or reject thoughts that are not of God while focusing on the truth that God has revealed in His Word, meditating on what is good and excellent instead of entertaining that which is sent in from the enemy. Although it can be granted that pharmaceuticals have their place in the treatment of depression and debilitating negative self-talk, the first resort should always be the above prescription and an abiding relationship with God and Jesus Christ. In conjunction with prayer, a person can be delivered from such falsehood, and the mind and brain can be healed as a person is set free by God alone. Drugs aren't a necessity in most cases, and I am a living and breathing testimony of this truth. When I was just 7 years old, our grade 2 class went on a field trip to the local pool, Centennial Pool for anyone curious. Looking at the other boys, I noticed some were skinnier or thinner than I, and that some of their ribs were noticeable when mine weren't as much. I was by no means a fat child. I was actually quite normal and rather average, but I did have a little more of a layer on my frame. Yet I didn't give it much more attention than that. Why would I? I was 7. I was more focused on having fun at the pool. Nevertheless, during our time there, I would walk along the deck and approach the edge to the shallow lane swimming pool. A girl from our class was seated on the edge, dangling her legs in the water. She'd looked up at me automatically and with zero hesitation, without even looking over my body. She would simply and matter-of-factly speak the words, "You're fat." I had no idea why she would suddenly and quite impulsively say such a thing. Looking back, though, on her saddening life and understanding that the devil was very active in trying to control and destroy her, there is no doubt in my mind now that she'd momentarily been used as a puppet, her will influenced or altogether overridden to deliver a fiery dart at me which I had no ability to defend myself from. But the seed was planted, and it would have a huge impact on me. Only 2 years later, still quite average and normal, I wouldn't dare tuck my shirts in because I thought I was fat and didn't want my supposedly fat waistline accentuated by my pants. I can still remember vividly at the age of 9 when my mother would approach me to tuck my shirt in, and I'd refuse to let her because I was fat. Her face twisted in disgust as if offended that such a foreign idea would even be in the mind of her little son with a normal body fat percentage. "What do you mean? You're not fat," she'd say, but I'd insist I was. A little over a decade later, and I'd have women saying, "You're hot," and I would crave hearing such words and go out frequently in pursuit of such empty appraisal. That, of course, would lead to all manner of harmful foolishness in order to attract women in the hopes of countering my deep-seated, poor body image. Nothing would bring reprieve. That is, until I came to know the Lord Jesus Christ, and He showed me in His Word that I was fearfully and wonderfully made, and that all of His works are wonderful, and that God had seen value in me as His creation made in His image, and been willing to pay the infinite ransom for me. My profound need for approval from women quickly melted away like ice under a hot iron. It's been nearly 6 years since I last felt that inclination to appeal to any woman physically for the sake of validating myself. What a beautifully freeing revelation that was. Now, when the fiery darts come, I am able to extinguish them just as Paul instructed. I know everyone struggles with different doubts about themselves, and I also know that so much of it is from the enemy. I wish everyone could taste this freedom. During my walk with the Lord, I have heard of intense spiritual attacks upon the minds of His saints. Pastor Chip Ingram, who I recommended listening to in The Good News, has testified that at different times during his ministry, often before teaching series on how the devil operates, into his mind would enter some of the most negative, self-destructive, and vile thoughts, most of which felt very foreign to him and seemed inexplicably sudden to him, and without any due cause. During an episode of The Comfort Zone with Ray Comfort, dealing with spiritual attack, pastors and evangelists Mark Spence, Easy, Emil Swain, and Ray Comfort himself all attested to periods in their ministries where they also came under intense spiritual attack through foreign thoughts entering their awareness. Commands like, "Worship me," and "Bow down to me," were invading their minds. These are all godly men who have no interest in rejecting God and submitting to their spiritual adversary, and they're also men of sound minds who are emotionally stable. This means that these thoughts were not the result of schizophrenia or other psychiatric conditions, although we will certainly discuss that condition later. What did they do when confronted with such slithering demands? The same thing Jesus Christ did when the devil called for Christ to worship him. They spoke Jesus' words as recorded in the Gospel of Matthew. "Begone, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve." Instantly, the intrusive thoughts would vanish as if a real spiritual enemy had been forced to retreat from them, and they were then filled with peace. Friend, as far out as these latter examples are, I can assure you they are most definitely real. As you yourself are probably quite familiar with the former examples of spiritual attacks through the mind meant to defeat you personally, the attacks these evangelists experienced were because, with their close relationships to God and the great faith He has grown within them, personal attacks are far more trivial to them, and the enemy apparently decides to fight harder. It would seem that for a time, to sharpen them and keep them humble, the Lord permitted, like with the Apostle Paul, a temporary thorn in the flesh, to buffet them so that they would remain close to God and in His grace, and in His care. Perhaps you've experienced any one of these attacks and recognized them to be foreign, or apparently not triggered by anything you were reading or watching or doing, or you simply did not want them but mistook them as originating internally. Whether infrequent or relentless and unbearable, respite from this enemy can be found in the Lord. Thanks for listening to this video, and I hope that it blesses you. Please do share it with others so they may have the opportunity to understand this incredible truth. Be blessed.